3, 2, 1, go.
So I'm going to start fresh in case anyone didn't watch the first video, but they just want to start sculpting. So I'm going to select all of these and delete. So you should see a green line and a red line. Make sure this says front. So now let's add a floor or a base for our little character. So we'll tap the scene button, add, and let's use a cylinder. So let's go ahead and validate the cylinder. And now we'll use the gizmo, which is our controller, and we'll make it bigger. And then let's use this little green sphere or node or dot, and we'll just shrink it like this. And then we'll move it so the top edge lines up with the red line. Okay, so now we have our base. So we don't need the grid anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. Okay, so now let's add a sphere to our scene. So we'll tap the scene menu, add, and we're going to add a sphere. So we'll use our gizmo and we'll move it up. And maybe we'll just make it a little bit bigger with the orange ring. So let's go ahead and keep everything organized. So let's label the sphere and the floor. So we do that in scene. So we have our sphere. We can go ahead and validate it. So just tap on gizmo and then tap on validate. And then tap the three little dots, name, and we'll just name it Pudge. I probably should name it body, but I'm going to name it Pudge. And then we'll hit OK. So now we have the cylinder. Let's move the cylinder below since it's on the floor, or since it is the floor. So we'll just long press it and then drag it down. Three little dots, name, floor. So let's save our progress so far. So we'll tap the folder, save. Okay, so let's tap on the sphere and let's move it down a little bit. All right, so it's touching the floor. And then we're going to use the move tool. So we'll tap move. And these settings look pretty good. So we're doing the radius around 210 or so. And we're doing the intensity around 50 or so. And for those of you who are new at this tutorial and haven't watched my previous one, part 1, the reason why my clay is this color is because I am using a matte cap. So if it's white, it'll look like that, but I'm using a matte cap, PXG clay. It's just easier to see. And also my scene is an orthographic. It's very important. See how you can see the top of this? You want to be an orthographic. All right, so let's use the move tool. Make sure you tap on the sphere. And we want to make sure that we keep symmetry on. So we should see two dots here. And to make it easier, go to the symmetry button here, scroll up or down, and then hit show line. So now you'll be able to see the red line where the symmetry is. So now with the move tool, we'll move the radius up a little bit more. We're just going to drag this down towards the ground. And we just want to make it so it almost looks flat on the ground. So something like that I think is pretty good. You can make it a little taller or a little wider, however you'd like to make your little character. But I think something like this is good. Now let's turn it this way. We can hit left. And we obviously need to make this part also go down. So we're just going to use the same tool and we'll just pull down. And if you look from the backside, it's doing both sides, so we don't have to worry about the other side. We just want to make sure that this looks good and natural. I think something like that looks good. Okay. So now if we look on the top, you can pretty much see the shape of it. Feel free to kind of round it out if you want, or make it a little bit of a different shape if you'd like. Okay, I'm going to hit front. So let's add 2 easy eyes. So we'll go to the scene menu. We'll add, and let's do sphere. So now we have our sphere here, and let's just name it eye. So we'll tap the 3 dots, name, eye. So we're not going to validate it just yet. So we'll use Gizmo. We'll move it up with this green arrow. And then we're going to turn our canvas this way. We'll hit left. And then we're going to use the blue arrow to move it forward. So now you can see it. So now we can kind of go back to the front. We can shrink it with this bigger orange ring. And then we can use the red arrow to move it left. Okay. Let's take a look at how we want it. I think that's pretty good. So you can make them as big as you want or as small as you want. Use the blue arrow to slide it into our pudge mesh. Okay, we have something like that. Now, if you'd like to make them a little bit flatter, because they're sticking out a lot now, what you can do is, let's say we're looking at the left side, so it's still a sphere. So what you can do is you can use this blue sphere and you can kind of squash it like that. And then you can push it back into the body. So if you do it that way, then you have to use these rings because you kind of want it to be flat on the surface. So just use these rings just to kind of make it look natural, to make it look flat. So you just kind of have to turn it and then just use your judgment to make it look as even as possible. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so, and of course you can always move it if you need to move it a little bit or, adjust it, play around with it. So let's take the tap on Gizmo, and it gives us our before validation options. One of them is mirror. So let's go ahead and tap mirror, and it should show up right on the other side. You can rename this to eyes. So just go to your scene menu, go to the mirror. You don't actually have to hide the hierarchy. I don't know why I did that. Just rename it to eyes. Okay, so let's go to add, and we'll use another sphere. So we'll move the sphere up and forward so that we can see it. So hit Gizmo. We'll just tap left here, or forward it up, forward and up, if you're feeling crazy. Okay, so I'm going to use this orange ring to shrink it. And now what I want to do is actually stretch it out, but it's not going to look really good if I stretch it out this way. I mean, it's actually not bad. There's another way that you can stretch it. Tap Gizmo, validate, and then go over here and tap symmetry, and then go here, tap on this little triangle and go to vertex. So now what's going to happen is when you pull with this red arrow, not the little sphere, the arrow, it should just stretch out. So maybe something like that. So let's go back to vertex and put it back to auto, and let's turn symmetry off. So now let's voxel merge this shape. So go here, voxel, remesh. Let's bring this down to maybe 150. And then hit remesh. And it should look exactly the same once we do that. But now we can just shrink it. Okay, so we have a piece like this. Now, one thing that I do when I have something like this, then I'm going to be moving to a face. Oh, and I also just noticed something. Sometimes when you add a new shape and you add it, it might go into a different mirror. So see right now, this, when we added it, it went into the eyes mirror. So we just need to take it out because right now there's two of them and there doesn't need to be. So long press and then move it up. And we can go ahead and label this mouth. Okay, so now we can move this in. I'll do it this way. So now we can move this right into the face. I never like the way that it looks if something straight is going into a curved surface. So what I do is I take move. I make sure that I'm on this piece. See how I can see this red line? So I'm using move. I have symmetry on. And I'll just kind of push from behind it and give it a nice curve. Whoops. So once you give it that curve, then you can take your gizmo and move it in, and it just looks a lot more natural. I think that looks great. So experiment with making it bigger, smaller. You can move it up, you can move it down, and you can give them a little, you can make them a little more happy using move and pushing this down a little bit. You can give them a little bit of a smile. Okay. I also like to give my characters little, I call them eye dots. So we can actually use the eyes. So we'll go to scene, select the eyes, and we're just going to clone the whole thing. So now let's just hit clone. So let's name this eye dots. And I'm naming the mirror. I named the word in red, which is the mirror. I'm naming that because once we validate it, it's going to take the name of whatever's in red. So now we have a duplicate of the eyes. So let's just tap on the yellow eye. And we can actually validate it. Let's move it up with the green arrow. And you can actually make a funny looking character like this. I'm going to move it over a little bit. And then I'm going to shrink it down. I think that's pretty good. I might move it back a little bit. And we can use drag. You can use drag or move, but it's a pretty small shape, so drag might be better. Move is better for bigger sweeping movements that kind of move a whole surface. Drag is more for like little adjustments that aren't really connected to like a whole surface. That's the main difference between drag and move. So I'm going to use drag. And if you want to make this a different shape, you can kind of push and pull on it. You might have to push and pull it out of the mesh as well, but that's easy. So let's make like some little leaves, almost like he's a little fruit or something, or a little candy. So we'll go to the scene menu. I'm going to tap pudge, so that way when we add a cylinder, it's not going to go into one of these mirrors again. So we'll hit add cylinder, and let's use our gizmo, and let's just move it up. Okay, so we want the cylinder to actually face forward, face toward us. So see this red ring? So this will spin it, but then it's a bit hard to get it perfectly straight towards us. So a trick that you can do is you can go over here and hit snap, and you can change this value, but 90 is great because 90 means 90 degrees towards us, or whatever way you use these rings. So now when you use the ring, it'll only move 90 degrees. So I'm going to turn that off because we don't need it anymore. I'll turn it to its side, and then I will make it thinner for the little leaf. Okay, so let's tap our gizmo, and we can go ahead and validate this. And while we're at it, let's name this leaf, so 3 dots. Name, leaf, leaf A. So then we can just clone this. Actually, let's shape it first. Let's work smarter. So let's use a move tool, and we're going to take this leaf, and then we're just going to stretch it up. But you know what? So I wanted to move the left and the right, but I also want the front to match the backside. So I need not only red, let's go to symmetry, and we need a line down this middle. I think it might be green. Okay, and like in the last video, when I put it on the green, it's going to the world center. So I need to tap local. There we go. So now when we use move, as long as we have symmetry on. All right, so now we'll use the move tool, and we can just move this up. So just kind of move the sides, and you can make a leaf any way that you want. Maybe I'll make it a little bit more round on top. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So we'll take the gizmo, and let's make it smaller. It looks kind of funny now. So we'll make it smaller. And maybe we'll put it back here, and we'll move it down. And what I like to do is put a little bit of a bend in it. So again, I'll go back to move. I use move a lot. But remember, we have this green, the green symmetry, so we can't push it back because it'll be pushing on itself on the other side. So just go back to the symmetry, and we'll just turn green off. Make it a little bit bigger. So now I'll just push sort of in the middle. It's kind of the middle bottom. And I just try to push it kind of evenly like that. Something like that. So now I'll just take the gizmo, and I'm going to use this red ring to sort of just tilt it. And then you can just use the arrows to sort of move it into the body, into the head. And now you can just kind of place it wherever you'd like. So I have to laugh at my own voices, inflections. I don't know where they come from. I really have no idea. But they sound so funny to me sometimes. I want to tilt mine back a little bit more. Maybe something like that. So now we can take this leaf from the scene menu again, tap the 3 dots, and we can clone it. And let's just rename it so we don't get it confused. Name, leaf B. Okay. And let's go ahead and save just in case. So we'll save. You might have autosave on. And here's another little trick. So right now it would be difficult if we just wanted to bring it just directly to the right. But there's a tool called Align. So if you tap Align, it's going to align with the project. So it'll always be left and right. This will always be up and down. So it's a little bit easier if you just want to drag something in that direction. And then you can go back, you can hit Align, and you can go back to the object's orientation. And then you can kind of change it. I think I'm going to shrink it. So this little character will have a bigger leaf and then like a little baby leaf as well. Maybe we'll rotate it a little bit more. So we'll do something like this. I think that looks pretty cute. Okay, so really quickly, let's change this to out of matte cap. So let's just say that we finished our character. So we'll tap this little sun. We'll change from matte cap to lit PBR. And what I like to do is before I light it, I like to change all the colors to something neutral because it's easier to light with. If you're trying to light something with white, the refraction and everything, it's going to be too bright. So let's go to our scene. Let's select everything. And then let's find a color. So I'm going to tap this little circle that has a line through it, this little sphere. So now we have our little color window. And as soon as you go onto the color, it should change. So now you can pick any color that you want. Maybe we'll do this sort of interesting color. It's a little bit of a darker yellowish color. But there's also colors. If you tap here, there's some colors. These are ones that I've saved. I usually use this color, but maybe I'll try something different this time. Now it's very close to the background, so let's change the background color. So let's go here to this little picture, tap the color, and you can change it to whatever you want. I'm going to make mine kind of dark and kind of cool. Okay, there we go. I'm just going to redo my lighting, make sure you can see everything clearly. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. Let's make sure that we've labeled everything. Yep, everything looks good. So now we can light it. So the first step to lighting is turning off the environment, because the environment is what's giving everything this, this light color here. It's all from the environment. Now, if you tap this little sun, this is my own environment. If you tap here, you see all the environments. And this is the one that I sell on my Gumroad. That's my eye glare environment. I always use it. I love it. It looks great for reflections. But for now, we're going to turn that off. So everything should be black. And now we can add our first light. So we'll tap here, the little sun, lights. We can add our first light. So here's some of the tools in conjunction with the light. They're the same tools that if you tap here, then this box comes up. So these are the same. These are just kind of like a shortcut. You also have this shortcut here. So there's a few ways to get to the light options. But what's most important is there's 3 types of lights. There's a directional, which is like the sun. There's a spot, and there's a point. Well, let me show you the spot. There you go. So there's a spot. Oops. And then there's a point light. So those are the 3 lights. For the first one, we'll just keep it at directional. But I want to put this number. Oops. Let's just slide it up to 2. And actually, I had moved the light in the wrong direction. Let's put it here, put it here. It doesn't matter where we put the gizmo. The light is always going to be wherever this white arrow is pointing, that's where the light is coming from. But I like it the way that it lands in its default spot. So let's go back to the light. Let's just delete it and add a new one because I like where it is by default. So I'm going to slide this back up to 2. And then I'm just going to move it. Whoops. And if you lose your light icon, just go back here and just hit light icons. So now you can just tap on the little icon and you can move it up here. The reason I move it up here is because it just makes sense that this is where it would be because this is where the light's going, even though you can move it anywhere on the screen. So this, let's rename this in our light panel. This is going to be key. Let's clone it. And this is going to be, we'll tap the little pencil, rim. So for this one, we'll move it over, down. And we're going to just rotate the green ring until we have a nice bright rim of light on the dark side of the character. So just use the green ring and you can just rotate. Okay, so now it's on this side, but we need to use the red ring to bring it down. And now it's a little too much on the front. So what we need to do is take the green ring again, and we need to move it so it's coming more from behind, just like that. And maybe with the red ring, maybe a little bit further down so it goes all the way to the floor. So that's a pretty good rim light. All right, so next we can clone this light again. And let's use this red arrow and let's bring this one to the other side. And we can just put another edge of light on the right side, but it doesn't need to be the same as the left. So now we're just pointing it this way, and it can be a little bit more. See how it's a little bit softer? And we can actually make it softer still. If we tap here, and then we go to softness, you can make it a little softer still. And let's turn it down a little bit. There we go, that looks good. And last but not least, I want to show you a different light. We'll name this one Rim B. So let's change the light from a sun to a spotlight. And as you can see, the spotlight, it does matter where the light goes. So you can control it obviously with these rings. So let's move it up, over a little bit, and then try to hit it from an angle, kind of pointing down. I usually think that looks pretty good. It's a nice little like showcase light. So I like to aim it right about there, but I want to bring the intensity down a little bit. So just play around with it. You don't want it too bright. Okay, so let's move our character back to the middle. Let's hit front. Let's save this view. So we go to the little camera, add view, and I like to name them numerically. So I'm just going to put 1. So now we have our view. So if you move it, if you want to look at something else, you can always just go right back to the view. Okay, let's turn post-process on. So go to this little shutter and then turn on post-process. And you can see it changes a little bit. I'm going to bring my quality all the way up. You can leave yours down if you have, if you're not sure if your phone can handle it or if your tablet can handle it, then you can keep this turned down a little bit. Okay, so just going down the list really quickly, I usually have this on. I usually have this on. These look pretty good for now. Everything else is pretty good. And you can also save. You can play around with all those and you can save them. Once you tap here, then you can save them. Like I have my presets. If I tap DFD, then things change a little bit. A little bit of bloom, a little bit of tone mapping, but you don't have to play with that just now. I just wanted to show you what I have in case you want to try to match my settings. Okay, I'm going to do a quick save. I think it's looking pretty good. So the last thing that I like to do in Nomad, well, there's 2 things. First, let's take this, go back to our light panel, and let's turn on the environment. Now it's way too bright, so let's turn down the exposure. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. We don't want it too dark. We'll make it a little bit lighter actually. So I'll do probably like 1.4 or so. So let's take the body, or actually let's take the eyes. Let's make the eyes a little bit of a different color. So you can use the color ball. You can change the roughness. Maybe you want them glossy, like that old candy that used to come on a sheet of paper. What are they called? Dots, I think. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good. Let's take the body and let's change the material. So let's go here and we'll change from opaque to subsurface. And let's go to depth and just turn it down a little bit so it's not so see-through. So I'll do like 0.2. I might do it with the eyes as well. Here, subsurface. What I really like about subsurface is it colors in the shadow, so the shadow isn't black, because shadows actually have colors in them. So this is how I get things to look more realistic, or more natural, I should say. So these two little leaves, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll press subsurface, turn it down a little bit. Same thing with the other leaf. Subsurface, and turn it down a little bit. And you can play around with the lights. If you have a really bright light, that's what the subsurface will affect. So for example, we have this rim light over here. If I tap it and I bring this up really, really bright, see how you can see through this? So you can adjust that. If I tap one of them, you can adjust that with the subsurface. See, if I bring it down, if I bring it up, it's more see-through. So that's what that is. Let's go ahead and turn this. I'll just undo back to where it was. Okay, there we go. Eye dots. We'll go ahead and do subsurface, but I think I might want to change the color a little bit. Maybe I'll use this little color sphere and I'll make them a little bit brighter. I'll bring the roughness up a little bit. Characters always look good if you use different types of material, like some things are rough, some things are glossy. For example, the eyes being glossy on this more rough character looks good. So that's just something that you want to try to do, is vary your materials, your surfaces. Okay, the mouth. I feel like the mouth can be like a darker color. Let's see, what color do we want the mouth? I think I like something like that, like almost like a brown, almost like a toasted brown. Yeah, so we'll do something like this. Use paint all. And let's make it subsurface. So we tap here, subsurface. I think that looks good. And actually, let's change these colors. So I'm going to go to my leaf and leaf B. I'll just tap both of those. And then I'll go to my little color wheel. And let's change them to something a little more natural. Maybe we'll do like a nice light green. Okay, I think that looks good. And let's change this to maybe a darker color. We'll use a darker green. And then maybe we'll subsurface that as well. Nice. So last but not least, let's turn left. And our character looks cute, but I think I want to trim the bottom, because if I hit solo, you can see that it's more round. So I'm just going to take trim. And this is really optional. You don't have to do this, but so I'm going to use trim, rectangle. And now whatever's in this white rectangle will be trimmed. So I'm going to bring it up a little bit under where I want to trim, because the surface might not look that great. So a little bit underneath, and then I'll trim it. So now we hit solo. Now it's nice and trimmed. All right, and you have yourself one of my fruit pudgies. These are the characters that I always include in my artwork, and they're very cute, very simple characters, but it just goes to show you that just think of things in shapes. You can use shapes to make very cool sculpts. So I hope this was something that was really easy to do. Hopefully you followed along. Let me know if there's any questions or comments in the below in the comment section. And of course, I'm using Nomad 1.84, so in the future, just know that things might change. But hopefully if you comment, then I'll be able to sort of find a fix if something needs fixing in the future. But I think that's about it. Always do a quick save. If you like this, but you want to try something else, you can do save as, and then do new, and it'll add a number afterwards. So now you have a new file that you can change the colors, and you still have your old one. Now, when you want to print this, or you want to export it, go to this little folder, scroll all the way down to render. A render is an exported image, and you can, obviously these options are pretty self-explanatory. Screen is just the size of the screen. They have things like 4K if you want to do it like that. So maybe I'll do 4K since I have to show you guys in the video. So you just first make sure that you go here, and just make sure that you might want to turn this up before you render it. Just make sure everything looks good, and then just go back, and then you can export it. Now it's high, so just make sure that you save it before you do it in case it crashes. And that's it, and here's the final. So have fun with it, play around with it, and just remember, think in shapes, and you can pretty much sculpt anything. You'll get more and more advanced with time. If you like this video, be sure to check out my Skillshare classes. I have a ton of Skillshare classes, and they're structured very much like this video. Also, they're edited a little bit more for Skillshare, but they're very much like this. So if you want to support, and if you want to really go deeper, then you can take beginners to mid-level classes, and then my advanced classes there. Also, I'm going to have a lot of stuff going up on Patreon soon. So I do have a Patreon. I think I'm going to put all of my sculpts there. And I think I might just put, I don't know, just lots of other fun stuff so people can have access to my sculpts if they want them. Keep drawing, keep sculpting. I'll see you all in the next video.